The galaxy had seen many empires rise and fall. Ancient civilizations had carved their names into the stars long before humanity learned to make fire. The Galactic Council had existed for over 50,000 years, watching species grow, expand, and eventually fade into history. They had rules, traditions, and a careful balance of power that kept the galaxy peaceful. Then humanity arrived. At first, the Council did not take humans seriously. They were small creatures from a forgotten corner of the Milky Way. Their planet was covered in water and poison air. Their bodies were fragile, their short, and their technology primitive. When humans sent their first radio signals into space, most Council species ignored them completely. A few scientists studied them briefly and wrote reports calling them unremarkable primates with limited potential. They were the first to make contact. They were a peaceful species of plant-like beings who specialized in trade and diplomacy. They arrived on Earth expecting to find simple creatures easily impressed by advanced technology. Instead, they found humans had already reverse-engineered communication devices within 3 years of first contact. They were surprised but not worried. They welcomed humanity into the galactic community and helped them establish their first colony ships. Within 200 years, humanity had spread across 40 star systems. They built faster ships than anyone expected. They developed weapons that made older species nervous. They reproduced quickly and adapted to environments that would kill most other beings. The Council began to pay attention, but they still saw humans as young and harmless. They were wrong. The first real conflict came from the Empire. There were proud warriors who controlled a large section of the galaxy. They had conquered dozens of species and believed strength was the only true measure of worth. When humans expanded into a system they claimed, the insect-like warriors attacked without warning. They destroyed 3 human colony ships and killed over 2 million people. They expected humans to surrender immediately, as every other species had done. Humans did not surrender. They declared total war. They had never faced anything like human warfare. Other species fought with honor codes and careful rules. Humans fought to win. They used every tactic available, no matter how brutal or strange. They attacked supply lines, poisoned water sources, used psychological warfare, and never stopped pushing forward. Human soldiers did not retreat when wounded. They kept fighting until they could not move. They found this terrifying. The war lasted 12 years. When it ended, the empire was broken. Humans had conquered executed their leaders, and scattered their people across refugee camps. The Council was shocked. They had never seen a young species defeat an established empire so completely. Many Council members began to fear humanity, but they said nothing publicly. They hoped humans would calm down now that they had won. But humanity remembered every insult. They remembered being called primitive. They remembered being ignored and dismissed. They built bigger fleets and stronger weapons. They formed alliances with smaller species who were tired of being bullied by older empires. Slowly, carefully, humans began to reshape the galactic order. The collective was the next to challenge humanity. There were ancient beings of pure energy who had existed for over 1 million years. They considered themselves the true rulers of the galaxy, guiding other species from the shadows. When humans refused to follow their secret commands, they decided to make an example of them. They used their advanced technology to destroy an entire human star system, killing 8 billion people in a single moment. The response was immediate and absolute. Humans developed new weapons specifically designed to harm energy beings. They hunted across the galaxy, destroying their temples and sacred places. The war was brutal and lasted 50 years. When it ended, the collective had ceased to exist. Not a single remained alive. Humans had committed their first genocide, and they showed no regret. The galaxy watched in horror. Species that had existed for thousands of years began to reconsider their relationships with humanity. Some tried to form closer alliances, hoping friendship would protect them. Others quietly began building defensive weapons, preparing for the day humans might turn on them. The Council issued warnings and demanded humans accept restrictions on their military power. Humans ignored them completely. Over the next 1,000 years, humanity became the dominant force in the Milky Way. They controlled the most star systems, had the largest fleet, and possessed weapons that could destroy entire planets. But they were not cruel without reason. Species that treated humans with respect were rewarded with trade agreements and protection. Those who insulted or threatened humanity learned to regret their choices quickly. The Syndicate learned this lesson too late. They were shape-shifting creatures who specialized in assassination and political manipulation. They had controlled many governments from the shadows for centuries. When they tried to manipulate human politics, humans discovered their scheme within 5 years. The response was swift. Human agents hunted every they could find. They destroyed colonies and exposed their networks across the galaxy. Within a decade, they were nearly extinct, hiding in the darkest corners of space. Some species thought they could use numbers against humanity. The hive was a collective mind controlling trillions of insect warriors. They believed no species could match their sheer population. They launched a massive invasion of human space, sending billions of soldiers in endless waves. The war was long and bloody. Human casualties were enormous. But humans never surrendered, never gave up, never stopped fighting. They developed biological weapons that targeted specifically. They found the hive's central minds and destroyed them one by one. After 30 years of war, the hive collapsed completely. By now, most species understood the truth. Challenging humanity meant death, not just defeat or embarrassment, but complete destruction. Humans did not forgive, and they never forgot. Every species that had attacked them had been wiped out entirely. There were no survivors to tell their stories, only records kept by humans themselves. The Galactic Council eventually accepted human leadership. They had no choice. The alternative was extinction. Humans rewrote galactic laws, established new trade systems, and created a peace that had never existed before. For 3,000 years, the galaxy knew no major wars. Species that once fought constantly now lived side by side under human protection. It was a golden age, built on the ruins of those who had opposed humanity. But there were always those who refused to accept human dominance. Small groups and hidden species plotted in secret, waiting for their chance to strike. Most were discovered and destroyed before they could act. Human intelligence networks were vast and thorough. Nothing happened in the galaxy without humans knowing about it. Then came They were unlike any species humanity had encountered before. They came from outside the Milky Way, crossing the void between galaxies in ships that known physics. They were massive creatures, each one the size of a small moon. They communicated through gravity waves and fed on the energy of stars. When they arrived, they announced their intention to consume the galaxy and move on. Humanity sent diplomats first, as they always did. They offered peace, trade, and coexistence. They ignored them. They began consuming stars at the edge of the galaxy, destroying entire systems and killing billions of beings. The Council begged humanity to stop them. Other species offered whatever resources they had. Everyone understood that only humans could face this threat. The war against them lasted 200 years. It was the longest and most terrible conflict in galactic history. Humans lost hundreds of worlds and trillions of lives. They developed new weapons that could harm the massive beings, but each victory cost them dearly. They adapted to every strategy, learned from every battle, and kept advancing. But humans adapted faster. They always had. They created weapons that destabilized the very fabric of space. They built ships that could travel through dimensions they could not follow. They found weaknesses in the massive creatures and exploited them without mercy. Slowly, painfully, humans pushed back. The final battle took place at the edge of the galaxy, near the great void between stars. Humanity gathered every ship they had, every weapon they possessed, and every ally willing to fight. They had consumed thousands of stars and grown incredibly powerful. Many believed this was the end of everything. It was not. Humans deployed a weapon they had developed in secret, something so powerful it had never been tested. It tore holes in reality itself, sending them into dimensions from which there was no return. The creatures screamed across every frequency as they were pulled apart and scattered across infinity. When the battle ended, not a single remained in this universe. The galaxy celebrated for years. Monuments were built to honor the fallen. Songs were written about human courage and sacrifice. For the first time, other species truly understood why humanity had become so powerful. It was not cruelty or ambition that drove them. It was the simple refusal to ever accept defeat. After the war, no species ever challenged humanity again. There was no point. History had proven what happened to those who tried. They were gone. They were gone. The and dozens of other species existed only in historical records. They had all believed they were stronger than humanity. They had all been wrong. Thousands of years later, young species entering the galactic community would ask the question that defined the modern age. Who was the last species to oppose humanity? The answer was always the same. They were the last, and they were wiped out. The lesson was clear. Humanity had not become rulers of the galaxy through luck or circumstance. They had earned their position through blood, sacrifice, and an absolute refusal to surrender. Any species foolish enough to challenge them would face the same fate as all the others. Complete destruction, with no exceptions and no mercy. Some called humans monsters, others called them saviors. The truth was somewhere in between. Humans were creatures who had crawled out of mud and reached for the stars. They had faced every challenge, overcome every enemy, and built an empire that would last for eternity. They had proven themselves worthy of their place in the universe. And no one would ever take that from them. The galaxy belonged to humanity now, not because they had asked for it, not because they had planned it, but because everyone who tried to stop them had been erased from existence. That was the simple truth that every species learned eventually. Oppose humanity, and you would become a story told to children. A warning about pride and foolishness. A reminder that some forces in the universe cannot be defeated. They had been the last to learn this lesson. There would be no others.